Here are some of the headlines we are featuring today from your favorite news outlets at offthepress.com. Hurricane Idalia is already heading off to sea, but it left one heck of a mess as it raced through Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina. Cleanup crews have their hands full and their eyes on 3 more tropical storms heading for the East Coast. House Republicans are tiptoeing closer to an impeachment of President Biden after the Oversight Committee chairman said that Biden may have been the most corrupt vice president in history. And that's saying something. Defrocked Catholic Cardinal Theodore McCarrick's dementia has let him escape further prosecution on multiple sex abuse charges, the latest embarrassment for the church. And those plant-based straws that were said to be safer for the environment turn out to be full of forever chemicals. A new report suggests that they might even be worse than the plastic straws they replaced. For stories like these and more updates all day long from your favorite news outlets, go to offthepress.com.
America's Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
We've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Steve Gruber. Today is Thursday, August 31st. Let's get to today's top stories. Thank you for joining me again today. Do appreciate it. The Gateway Pundit has found records that show that the ACLU representatives equipped ACLU poll workers with iPads to cancel absentee ballots. What? Gateway Pundit Jim Hoff will join me in just a moment to talk about that. Also, Joe Biden just can't help himself. He's made a career out of fabricating and embellishing stories, and it looks like he has no plans to stop spinning yarns anytime soon. We'll have his latest, shall we say, disinformation coming up in just a moment here in the program. Then, the parents are from multi-faith backgrounds, putting their differences aside and standing united to express one voice when it comes to their kids. Lucas Miles would join me with that story later this hour. But first, there's something we need to talk about because it is important. For those of us that were not supporters of Joe Biden and those of us that knew he was a serial liar and plagiarist for his entire life, we've not been surprised by his false claims. Too many to count since he jumped on the campaign trail and certainly since he was led into the Oval Office to fall asleep in his ice cream. But his lies have often been very hurtful. Take what happened in Maui just a few days ago. He turned a human tragedy with more than 115 killed and as many as 1,000 Hawaiian residents missing, Americans missing and killed after a firestorm swept through the once very cool city of Lahaina. He took that moment to make it about himself, of course. First, he couldn't pull himself away from his luxury oceanside vacation in California for almost 2 full weeks. And when he did finally bother to show up in Maui, he talked about a small kitchen fire in his Delaware beach house that was put out in about 20 minutes. But the narcissist in chief decided to tell those in Maui how he was so devastated by that fire because he almost lost his cat and he almost lost his car. He made these comments in front of people whose family members were incinerated by a wall of fire and it was left to burn because one of the people in charge there believes that water is some godlike substance and could not be spared to spare the lives of those being burned alive for hours. Now, of course, it's not the first time that Biden has made an unspeakable tragedy about himself. In fact, you can pretty much count on him doing that. If there's death, destruction, then Joey's ready to step up and tell you why he understands your pain, because by God, he's been there and he has suffered like you. Well, except that he really hasn't. I mean, has Joe Biden suffered terrible loss in his life? Yes. A wife and daughter in a car wreck 50 years ago and a son to cancer, sure. But that doesn't make it the same as what these people in Hawaii just went through, or worse, his disastrous pullout from Afghanistan, when tragedy there could have been avoided with leadership. Millions of people that voted for Joe Biden falsely bought into the idea that old Joe was going to be a moderate, a good old grandpa type, middle-of-the-road president. that would work hard to unite the nation, but that has not turned out to be true at all, has it? In fact, I think it's fair to argue Joe Biden has become the most polarizing president in American history. He's not a moderate at all and has governed from the extreme far left. In his presidency began to unravel just a few months into office when he completely disregarded the advice of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and his military advisors and abandoned Afghanistan in some twisted need to leave before we mark the 20-year anniversary of being in the country. The reckless decision, the fractured command, and the murky rules of engagement led to the worst military failure since the end of the Vietnam War. 13 U.S. military members were killed by a suicide bomber and his partner. Both could have been neutralized, taken out by American snipers before that bomb ever went off, but nobody would make the call. Biden's numbers plummeted and he has never recovered, and there are some very clear reasons for that. True to form, Joe Biden has never accepted responsibility for his epic failure of leadership in Afghanistan. Never, not once. But worse, almost every time it comes up, he brings up his son, Beau, and talks about how he died in the Middle East and came home in a casket. The problem, of course, is that is just another terrible lie that seems to percolate in the addled and dementia-filled mind of a senile old man. Beau did serve proudly in the military, but he died of cancer. He didn't die in the line of service, not at all. And worse than not accepting responsibility and making his tragic failure into some sad false story about himself is that he continues to make those same babbling, baseless claims even now. For the 13 Gold Star families, they met the caskets of their loved ones at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware, and so did Joe Biden. But he didn't want to be there. No, he kept looking at his watch. He didn't care about the men and women that died because he was too stubborn or too stupid to listen to his military advisors. And sadly, as we mark the 2-year anniversary of those horrible days this week, the families have never believed he cared about anyone but himself. Earlier this week, some Gold Star families let him hear all about it. Listen in.
Not a single person has been held accountable. Our so-called leader can't seem to even utter their names in public, not even once. Mr. Biden has run his entire political campaign for 50 years as the family man. Well, I've got news for you, sir. The curtain has been lifting, and that campaign slogan will never work again. We have seen what's going on in your family, and even worse, we've seen how you've been treating us as Gold Star families. And there couldn't be anything more disgusting and cowardly than the way you have treated us. You are a disgrace to this nation. You have no business having ultimate command over our military, and I regret not saying that to your face when I had the opportunity in Dover. I felt it more important to bite my tongue, but I also had more important things on my mind at that time, like receiving my son's lifeless body stateside. While I stood there on the tarmac, watching you check your watch over and over again, all I wanted to do was shout out, "It's 2:30. But out of respect to the other grieving families, I bit my tongue once again. Well, as you could probably tell by now, I'm done biting my tongue. You, sir, stole their lives, their futures, their dreams, and have ripped apart 13 families. You cannot even man up and admit that."
Man up! It's not going to happen. Not now, not ever. Joe Biden will never admit when he's wrong. A few weeks ago, California Congressman Darrell Issa brought the families together for the first time. That's something the White House clearly should have done, but didn't care enough to do. You know, like visiting other victims in places like East Palestine, Ohio. These things involving real Americans suffering from real tragedies just don't seem to matter to the senile geezer. You know, actions do speak louder than words, just like Mom always said. And Joe's actions are being called out this week loudly and clearly. Here's more from those Gold Star families.
What he could have done was not talk about his son when it was about my son and the other 12 on that day. I have never spoken to him since. He's refused to speak with us. He does not have any coordinates to talk with us. He could call me. I have a phone number. He could call me. I'm not sure what he could do at this point. Honor them, say their names, talk about them. Yeah. And man up and talk about your failures that you held in Afghanistan.
You know, I sat and watched as one family member after another took a chance to speak this week and reminisce about the person they loved and lost in Afghanistan that was avoidable. And then you realize that Joe has been on vacation more than 40% of the time he is supposed to have been in office. They gave their all, and he doesn't bother to show up for work most of the time. And I want to remind you, the failures of the ill-advised Afghanistan pullout are not something we just figured out. Like I said, that was the beginning of Joe Biden's collapsing poll numbers. He's never recovered. And here's what it was like back then, if you don't remember. Listen.
Listening to President Biden and his top national security advisors before the horrible bombing, they were making this sound like a smashing success. But you heard what Secretary Blinken just said.
Yeah, I mean, it is, they have been describing something that it isn't reality. This has been an incredible airlift, more than 100,000 people evacuated, but what a disaster. Clearly, Thursday was the worst day of the Biden presidency. And we don't really know, Martha, how bad it really is. We know the disaster that has unfolded. Now the big question is, does Afghanistan once again become a safe haven for terrorist attacks on U.S. interests around the world or at home?
Which is, of course, why they said they were getting out, that was solved.
Yep. And you know, maybe part of the reason why Afghanistan had not been such is there was a military presence in Afghanistan. But now we will have this over-the-horizon capability. But the bottom line is the terror threat has increased and our ability to combat it has decreased.
And that was 2 years ago. They knew what a disaster it was. And honestly, that should have been all anyone needed to know about who Joe Biden really is. He's not some grandfatherly type, oh, shucks, good guy. No, he is everything I've been telling you from before he got elected. He is not too bright, way too arrogant and self-centered, and a self-serving individual. He's willing to lie about, well, just about anything and do whatever it takes to help himself out of a jam or out of some bad narrative. That's why I can tell you the scandals are real, and his senility is real, and his problems are very real. But he's far too arrogant to easily step aside, and that is the Democrats' big problem right now. I hope Joe hangs on to make it to Election Day 2024, because that way we can sweep him and his idiot cronies out of office and get a real dedicated American back in the Oval Office with a real administration. And just in case you missed anything, I have one more thing for you. Congressman Byron Donalds did a nice job of summing up the Biden presidency so far. Here's a look at part of that.
If you watch him, if you've seen what he's done the last 2 years, this is a president has had a historic administration in just 2 years.
Every week is something new.
Inflation's highest increase in 4 decades.
A baby formula shortage.
The supply chain crisis on full display in grocery stores.
The Keystone XL pipeline has been blocked.
Canceled its planned oil and gas lease sales in Alaska.
Halt oil and gas leasing and drilling on federal land.
Gas prices soaring to the highest average ever recorded.
Mortgage rates have soared to the highest level in 22 years.
The number of military service members being discharged for refusing the COVID vaccine is growing.
The president is ordering nearly all federal workers get vaccinated within 75 days, eliminating their option to be tested.
CDC coordinated with the teachers' unions to slow the school reopening process.
8th grade U.S. history and civic test scores dropped last year to their lowest levels ever recorded.
The FBI directed agents to use counterterrorism measures to track parents critical of their school board,
giving the FBI a list of targeted customers.
The FBI's Richmond field office recently published an internal document promising to punish, quote, radical traditionalist Catholics.
Just so we're clear, none of it was Joe Biden's fault. And if it was, oh boy, he would feel your pain. I feel your pain. Ice cream, Joe? Ice cream, 2 scoops. That about covers it. Coming up after the break, Gateway Pundit has found records that show that ACLU representatives were given authority to process absentee ballot applications received through online portals. And then they equipped ACLU poll workers with iPads to cancel absentee ballots. Really? Well, the founder of Gateway Pundit, Jim Hoff, will detail that story next on America's Voice Live. Well, new reporting from the Gateway Pundit this week claims that the ACLU workers in Fulton County, Georgia, had the ability to process absentee ballot applications and cancel them without county supervision from their personal computers. Let that sink in for a second. The ACLU has come under scrutiny from this same news outlet over the last several years for equipping untrained workers with the ability to process ballot applications in a scheme that could definitely undermine election integrity without question. Joining me live now to discuss this is the founder of Gateway Pundit, Jim Hoft. Jim, of course, you get labeled as a conspiracy theorist and a guy that wears a tinfoil hat, but I'll say this. I'd rather wear a tinfoil hat like I do, apparently, than the blindfold being passed around for Democrats. I mean, that's, these people don't see anything, they don't hear anything, and they trust the government. What happened to the Democrats of 1970, Jim? Don't trust authority, push back, question the government. Now it's like more government, stand in line. What happened to those people?
I think that's a day long gone. I know that there are some Democrats out there that I really appreciate. I'm a friend, I would say, with Robert Kennedy Jr. I like a lot of the things he's saying. In fact, I think he fits nicely in with MAGA on a lot of issues. But unfortunately, what we've seen, just as another example today, we've seen these Proud Boy operatives who were in Washington, D.C. on January 6th, and they're getting put in prison for over 15 years apiece for attending this rally.
And, I just saw it come down. 17 years. I just saw that come down. I want to comment on RFK just for a moment here, because I agree with you. And whether you agree with all of his policies or not, because on guns, we don't agree, all right? We'll just say that. But he's honest, and he puts it out there, and he's well-read, and he's certainly about 100 points higher on the IQ scale than Joe Biden and most of the Democrats. So RFK Jr. is a bright individual who offers an alternative view of the world and appreciates the free speech of this country and the Constitution. And I think the Democrats would be well-served if they looked at what he's saying and doing and saying, hey, maybe we should talk about this instead of attacking him all the time. Just my 2 cents, Jim.
Yeah, absolutely. Instead, they push him to the side and call him the conspiracy theorist as they're pushing all of this green energy nonsense that's going to crush our country. It already has. And the trans movement that they push, the porn in children's libraries, that's what they think is, legitimate for American culture today. When Robert Kennedy Jr. is just basically saying a lot of the same things we say. So I'm glad there are people like Robert Kennedy Jr. out there, because not every Democrat is a complete Marxist or loon today. There's several good Democrats out there. Let me just say that. All right.
Right. No, it's true. He's not just a stool pigeon. Look, he's a traditional Democrat, and we'll have our legitimate differences, but we can have a conversation. You can't have a conversation with these modern-day Democrats at all. They shut you down. They silence you. They try to cancel you. You certainly know that you've been on the receiving end of cancel culture a number of times yourself, Jim. Now, before we get too far gone here, let's talk about this ACLU scheme, for lack of a better term. Tell me what you found. Tell me what you learned. What are you reporting?
Yes, so our reporter, Brian Lupo, advanced this story. We already knew at Gateway Pundit, and we reported back in 2020 during the election, right after the election, that Georgia was hiring a lot of these far-left groups to work during the elections. This was Gabriel Sterling. He's an officer in Georgia. He reports to Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State, and he bragged about this. He actually went online and did an interview with some far-left groups and bragged about how they were hiring the ACLU and Black Lives Matter and different groups who were going to work the elections. So that all happened. Paul Sperry did a report recently on that. He's an investigative reporter. And Brian Lupo, our reporter, dug deeper into this and then found that they actually had some access that were quite surprised that they would give to election workers and some independence in the fact Brian believes, and he found this in a podcaster that had pushed this theory that they were given access to actually manipulate some of the votes, record the votes, eliminate votes, which is just shocking. But so anyway, that was the report that Brian put out there.
Jim? Yeah, okay, so how does nobody say, wait a second? You can't do that. I mean, it brings into question the honesty of those on the other side. Do the rules just not matter? Cheat to win? The outcome is all that matters. It doesn't matter how you get there. It's the outcome, the outcome, the outcome. I mean, you look around what happened in 2020 around this country, and people say, yeah, that seems to be all they cared about was the outcome. Because common sense dictates that 2020 didn't line up quite the way that it was reported. Let's just say that, Jim. Do you think that's fair?
Oh, I think that's absolutely fair. And that goes with a lot of our reporting from day one. In fact, we had even video we put up from Georgia a couple of years ago that shows one of these election operatives walking, and she's filming herself as she walks into work in the back rooms of the State Farm Center in Atlanta, Georgia. And there's stacks of ballots here and there and lying around, and she goes in her separate cube, and she has her own opinions about the elections. We looked that up, and she's got her own stack, and there's nobody really looking over her shoulder. She has all this access. She has all this ability to put in ballots and put in information any way that she can, because there's no supervisors or observers looking over her shoulder. It's unbelievable how shoddy this election appeared to be in Georgia, and we would even say in several states. And of course, Steve, the results were just completely they didn't add up for a lot of reasons, as we all believe.
I mean, you look at whether it's Michigan, where I live, or Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, where you've got the voter rolls that have, well, we found that in some places there are more registered voters than there are adults. There's no way to get there. There's no way to justify that. You can't twist those numbers, Jim. And that's just one example. It's so easy to look at, and the list is long of, wait a second, you've got all of these mail-in ballots. They all came in together. They look the same. The signatures all look the same. Don't worry about it. They're good. There are so many examples. We don't need to get into it. But the question for you, last question, how do we do better November of next year?
Yeah, well, I think there are some things that are happening, but I think what you said was key, Steve, and that is we have to clean up the voter rolls. I believe if you have the bloated voter rolls, it gives Democrats, it gives Republicans the ability to cheat. You have to clean those up, because if you have the bloated voter rolls, like Wisconsin, for example, has over 7 million people on the voter rolls in a state that only had slightly over 4 million eligible voters. So that needs to happen. I think that is taking place, but the Republicans really need to wake up, or we're going to see the same thing happen in 2024 that we saw in 2020, where a candidate who doesn't campaign, is not popular, cannot communicate, hides out on vacation half the time, is going to be called the winner after 3 or 4 days of counting votes in the back room. And we can't let that happen again. Right.
No, we can't let that happen again, Jim. I appreciate your reporting on this. We will talk again soon, because you and I are both on the same page of, look, pull back the curtain. Enough of the secrecy, enough sneaking around, enough of this clandestine nonsense. We're done with that. Jim Hoft, Gateway Pundit, thank you, sir.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Really appreciate it. All right, after the break. Joe Biden disappoints Maui victims as he lets them know the country won't be giving them any more than that $700 they got, that big windfall of $700. We'll analyze FEMA's take it or leave it attitude next on AVL. If you missed it earlier this week, FEMA Director Deanne Criswell delivering bad news to those Maui fire victims because they haven't had enough bad news already. Those trying to put their lives back together. Listen to this.
The critical needs assistance that was provided to those in Maui, $700 in payments to individuals there, given the cost of living in Hawaii, specifically in the Lahaina community. Is anything being done right now? Are there considerations or efforts being made to try to raise that cap, that $700 figure for those who are there?
Yeah, the $700 figure of critical needs assistance is really just that amount of funding for some of the very immediate needs that individuals have. Every year, the main part of our assistance, which is our individual and household program, adjusts annually based on inflation. This year it's $41,000 of a cap that individuals can get. That will get raised after the fiscal year. I don't know what that number is yet, but we do adjust that main portion of the funding that goes to individuals annually based on inflation.
$700. Do you know that Hawaii has the highest cost of living of any state? The highest cost of living of any state by far is Hawaii. They give them $700. Good luck. Maui, and FEMA members are staying in $1,000 a night resort rooms not far away. Maui residents will have to jump through more hoops than Ukraine to get more than that $700 apparently. And Criswell is likely just the messenger, as President Biden made this gaffe during remarks about the fire as well. Here's more.
What is your reaction to House Republicans who say that they're urging an investigation into the federal response in Maui?
Well, I welcome a federal response in Maui. I think that they should go out and talk to every elected official, from the mayors to the governors to the United States senators to the congresspersons. I welcome, and once they go out and see it, then I'm sure they'll provide the money.
Oh, he'd welcome a federal response. 2 scoops, Joey. Just someone tell Joe he's supposed to be the one leading the federal response, not rehashing old stories that have been debunked countless times, like, say, this one.
I didn't anything like that, but lightning struck my house. We had to be out of that house for about 7 months while it was repaired because so much damage was done to the house, and half the house almost collapsed.
The house almost collapsed. The only thing that collapsed was his ability to read a teleprompter, to be competent, to engage in a conversation without lying. That all collapsed. Our country's collapsing around him. What a clown. It must be aggravating hearing your president exaggerate a small kitchen fire and almost losing his cat in his car to relate to having your island burned down, people incinerated alive, including children, while he denies you need any more assistance than $700. But don't worry, Ukraine's doing fine. $250 million more dollars this week alone. Hawaii, how are you going to vote next year? Coming up after the break, religious parents come together to challenge a Maryland judge who is allowing their school district to teach things contrary to their beliefs. And it's not just Christian parents. Lucas Miles standing by to join me here on America's Voice Live. Don't go anywhere. Well, some Maryland parents getting together to challenge a ruling by a judge claiming that their school district stripped them of the right to opt their children out of storybooks that run contrary to their faith. In Montgomery County, Maryland classrooms, books about sexuality and identity, sexual identity, are being taught as early as pre-kindergarten. Right. Because that makes sense to who exactly? Now, the parents are from multi-faith backgrounds, but they're standing united to express one voice when it comes to protecting the kids. Parents say they feel as though the school district took away their ability to raise their children in a way that is consistent with their faith, whatever that faith may be. And they're asking a federal appeals court to restore parental preference. Listen.
We feel that we have the right to instruct our kids specifically on issues of family life and sexuality. And we found that we've had to, systematically and consistently prove to people that religion is real.
Religion is real. Last week, a U.S. District Court dismissed their request to let their kids opt out of classes where the books are read and discussed. Lucas Miles, the host of Church and State, joins me now to sort this out further, Lucas. Thank you for being here. Listen, how did the judge throw this out? I mean, now parents have no right to say, look, I don't need sex taught to my pre-kindergartner. May I be so bold? What the hell?
It's super concerning when you see this stuff. I mean, look, the state has a view right now, and this administration believes that it is their job to raise your children, that they know best, that their decisions, their voice, their choice of curriculum, their education talking points, and all the twisted after school special stuff that they're throwing at our children, that's what's best for your children, and you don't get a say in it. And this is where I think that, to some degree, I think that the left is overplaying their hand, because this is causing people to wake up. It's causing Muslims and Christians to unite. It's causing people to stand together and say, look, you know what, we might have differences about certain issues, but we have one thing in common, and that is it is not the state's job to raise our child. It's our job to raise our children. And so I really think that they've kind of woken a monster here a little bit, sleeping giant.
Yeah, there's a fundamental misunderstanding here, Lucas. Of the people, many of them currently in government, they work for us.
Yeah.
We don't work for them. We're not, to kneel and do as we are told. We're not to bend the knee and kiss the ring. They've got the whole relationship backwards. But they think they can dictate to us and give rules and tell us how things are going to be when it comes to our own children, our own land, our own faith, our own gathering, our own predetermined path in life, my pursuit of happiness, and the list goes on. And this is the latest. But what I'd like to point out, and I see that a lot in Michigan. Michigan has a large Muslim population that is rejecting the LGBTQ teachings in class, rejecting Pride Month, telling communities you can't fly that flag, and if you do, you'll get fired. And people did in Hamtramck. The same is true in Dearborn and Dearborn Heights. Yeah. And so it's not Christians, because usually the left will paint the Christians, those evil white supremacist Christians. No. These are people from all walks of life, all faith backgrounds, saying stop trying to sexualize our kids, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. And look, this is a religious issue in the fact that most religions have acknowledged that it is the parents' job to oversee the home, to govern the household. But it's not a specific religious issue in the fact that it's about Judaism or Christianity or Islam. This is something that is I think common to anybody that has still some sort of a moral, they believe in a higher moral. They believe in some sort of divine, absolute morality that's there. And look, the attempts to hijack this is right out of sort of this Marxist, socialist, communist playbook. This is, it's what we saw in Nazi Germany with, kind of this propaganda that was being pumped to the children that were there at that time. Look, it's a bad look. I think for these school systems, it's a bad look for the administration. And I really hope that the parents continue to put the pressure on these school boards, to these school districts, to really the judicial system, that anybody that's standing in the way, trying to say that parents are not the highest authority in their children's life, unless there's a situation of abuse or something like that, it is absolutely the parents' job to be there front and center and to make the final call.
Well, here's the thing, Lucas, and it should have been crystal clear to those pushing these reckless agendas and trying to foist their perversions upon our children. Oh, it's book burning. No, it's pornography. It's not allowed in the middle school library, right? We saw that play out in Virginia when Glenn Youngkin was elected governor. He did it almost exclusively with the narrative of parents, they're your children. And we just have the privilege of teaching them for a few hours a day. Republicans like Youngkin and others should be crisscrossing this country, saying parental rights are the foundational principle of this country and this election coming up in 2024. Wouldn't you agree?
I absolutely agree. Look, we've had some similar issues in our area with the same sort of thing, and I think that this is it's very important. I mean, you have these library systems, school systems that are essentially distributing pornography and questionable material to children. Under most state statutes, that's illegal. But yet it's being allowed because nobody's doing anything about it. Nobody's prosecuting, and I think that this is really going to take some, county councils and other city officials to step up and say, no, we are going to prosecute that, in our area. And so I'm not a legal expert. I live in the theological space more than anything. But there's a lot of issues here that need address, and I think it's going to take all of us working together to make sure that this really just twisted and distorted ideology is pushed back once and for all.
Absolutely. They're not minor attracted persons because they start playing with the words. The word is pedophile. And I'm not accusing all Democrats of being pedophile, but a lot of what is pushed in these books would cross into that very disturbing territory. And the answer is no, absolutely not. Not at all. Lucas, as always.
No, thank you. I was just going to say, I was just in a meeting here actually today, and this topic came up. And one of the issues that was brought up was that you're constantly seeing in all these images and these books that are being distributed to children, it's always an older person with a younger, it's like an older male with a younger male, and these sorts of things that are being highlighted. If this was pushing, a heterosexual relationship like that, there's no way that would have fly. That would have been canceled a long time ago. Why? Because it's wrong. And if it's wrong there, it's also wrong in this instance. And the twisting of the language and hijacking language to try to justify this, we have to see through that, and we have to be strong and stand very boldly during this time.
Yeah, we will not normalize NAMBLA. Period. Yeah. All right, that's it. We will not. Lucas, again, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up after the break, a Finnish lawyer compares the Bible to Mein Kampf and attacks the parliament for tweeting a Bible verse. These people have lost their minds. I'll be back. Well, a prosecutor in Finland, Anu Mattila, prosecuted a member of parliament for refusing to relent on her Christian faith and quoting the Bible on social media, refusing to remove the verses. This same prosecutor compared the Bible to Mein Kampf. What a moron. Another parliament member, Havi Rasanen, a 62-year-old medical doctor, grandmother of 7, and former leader of Finland's Christian Democrats, gained attention from prosecutor Mattila for tweeting opposition to her denomination's stance on pride, leading to an investigation of Rasanen finding in 2019 radio debate on marriage where she voiced her objection to homosexuality and other deviant lifestyles, as she put it. She was interviewed on a DG International. Listen to this.
This doctrine in itself, it is insulting because she thought that if you call a people sinner, you think that they are inferior to other peoples, and what she said that if you blame deeds, then you blame the person. That it is impossible to make a division between people's deeds and their identity.
Mattila argued people are allowed to think what they want, but the expression of faith can be restricted, saying the Bible supplants the Finnish Constitution and is offensive, comparing Christianity to Nazism. Oh, boy. When one judges deeds, the whole person is judged. Actions cannot be separated from identity because actions are part of identity. Understanding deeds as sin is derogatory. Well, yeah, sin is derogatory to God. She was acquitted on all charges, which displeased the prosecution, who has the legal ability to file for a leave to appeal as an incorrect and unjust verdict. She's going to prosecute again. Of course she is. A California mom has won a landmark victory for parental rights against the Spreckles Union School District in Monterey County for their socially transitioning her daughter without parental consent. Jessica Conan, represented by the Center for American Liberty, won a $100,000 lawsuit on behalf of her 11-year-old daughter, who was informed by school administrators when her grades dropped and she was acting out in class, she might be, quote, upset because she didn't know who she truly was inside. The school then began socially transitioning her, allowing her to use the boys' bathroom and use male pronouns. Conan says, pay attention to that gut feeling. Listen to it. And listen to this.
My daughter, to me, she's a hero for sticking out. We definitely are going to be at peace and be able to try to move on from this. But parents, pay attention. Ask the questions that are awkward. Put yourself in uncomfortable situations because you don't know what someone's going through. You don't know what they're teaching in schools anymore. Just be active in your kids' lives and don't be scared to speak up.
Frightening place. Currently 168 school districts nationwide, overseeing 5,904 schools, have guidelines preventing faculty and staff from notifying parents if their child identifies as a gender other than their birth gender. At school, that's control over more than 3.2 million state-run public school students. Think about that. And think about how disgusting this story is. The city of Denver agreeing to pay $4.7 million to more than 300 protesters arrested for violating curfew while rioting in 2020. The city council unanimously agreed Monday to the payout, claiming Denver police the treatment of the protesters was wrong. Last year in federal court, jurors awarded $14 million in damages to 12 protesters, concluding police had used excessive force. Well, just let them burn the cities down, then at least they won't be bothered. At least 19 cities across the nation have paid out more than $80 million to protesters claiming harm from police arrests during the summer of 2020. You know, that was mostly peaceful riots. Philly's paying more than $9 million, New York $13 million to 1,300 defendants. That's $9,950 for each protester there. Somehow the math doesn't add up, but then again, none of this adds up, does it? We'll get back to the news after a break and a message from our sponsor, My Patriot Supply. Do you get that feeling daily that something bad might happen and happen soon? I seem to fairly often. But between the distractions and smoke screens in the media, we probably won't see it coming, not directly. That's why it's smart to invest in emergency food right away, right now. As they say, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. My Patriot Supply is the nation's leader in high-quality emergency food. Head to the website, preparewithrav.com, and you'll save $200 on your 3-month emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. Enjoy a wide variety of delicious meals offering over 2,000 calories every day for optimum strength under stress. I mean, if it's the end times, boys and girls, you got to be ready to rock. So stock up before panic sets in. Free shipping is automatic and your order ships fast. So go to preparewithrav.com. Preparewithrav.com. There are savings there, special deals, and most importantly, there's peace of mind that no matter what happens around the corner, you're ready. All right, so after the break, what makes America wonderful? We're going to talk about that. Plus your answers to our America's Voice question of the day. Well, we always want to send you away with a smile on your face and thinking about the good things in this world because we talk about so many serious things here that we need to lift people up a little bit before we send them on their way, right? So what makes America wonderful today? Well, as the saying goes, trust your intuition. That is exactly what Officer Ernesto Fernandez did when he tracked down and saved an autistic boy from drowning. You see, Officer Fernandez was driving around Miami when he saw a young boy with an iPhone in his hand, sprinting down the road, no shoes on, looked panicked, didn't understand what was going on. So he wheeled around, brought the car back to approach him and ask him, "Hey, everything all right? What are you doing? Where are your parents? What's happening?" Before he knew it, the kid hit the gas, running away even faster. Whew. So Fernandez followed him on foot to the marina. When he caught up to the young boy, the kid was nowhere to be found. Where was he? But the cell phone was laying there on the dock, but the kid wasn't there. So when he looked to his right, he saw ripples in the water, which indicated to him that the boy potentially had jumped into the water. Officer Hernandez quickly looked around, saw the boy was underwater, drowning. Quickly, he jumped in to rescue the boy. Listen.
When I saw him, I wasn't thinking. I needed to save him. Mm-hmm. I just jumped after him.
And you said he kissed you on the mouth, and then you knew that he was autistic at that point?
Yes, I knew he was autistic. The reason why my son is also autistic.
Oh.
And that's like a gratitude moment that they do to give you a kiss when you do something for them.
Wow, man, that's awesome.
Yeah. After that, both grandmas came to the scene. His dad came to the scene. They were thanking me and they were crying. A couple of sisters, I think I had like 3 sisters. Mm-hmm. And I was there at the right time because it wasn't like a call came in or anything like that. I just saw him running. I knew something wasn't right.
Yes, thank you, Officer Fernandez, for saving that young boy's life, reminding us that the heroes in our country continue to make America wonderful. Fund the police. Give them more money, would you please? Your America's Voice question today: will food costs change your plans for a Labor Day cookout? No. And I won't be roasting crickets either, my friends. We'll be having steak, baby. Carol Borgerding says, yes, just having a get-together with snacks and hand foods. Well, so it is. Vicki Weber: increase of food prices has impacted my entire life. All holidays are too expensive. Now, I know all that, but I'm going to do it anyway. Now, I like Matt's answer because he's right up my alley. I got a rifle, a shotgun, and a 4-wheel drive, or I've got a bow, a fishing pole, and a rifle. Something is definitely going on the grill this holiday weekend. Shoot straight, Matt. It's out of season, so don't get caught. Linda Shriver writes, would be nice, well, unless you live in South Carolina. Rifle season opens on the 15th of August every year. Linda Shriver writes, would be nice to afford a decent meal. You have to eat whatever you can afford these days in Biden's America. Bidenomics, my friends. And Mark Hardy shares this. Yes, food prices went up 20% this week. Wow, 20% this week. All right, thank you for spending time with me here today. I greatly appreciate it. Remember, I like to hear from you. I want you to tell me what's going on, like what I'm doing, hate what I'm doing, whatever it is. Go to SteveGruber.com, SteveGruber.com. Send me a line. Say, hey, Steve, this is what's up. Here's what we're doing good. Here's what you can do better, so I can hear from you all over the country. And don't forget to start your day tomorrow right here. The Steve Gruber Show kicks off live programming on RAV every Monday through Friday. And then I'll see you back here for America's Voice Live.